In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful.
I'd say the Isra and the Mi'raj, the way Allah Ta'ala took His slave, the way Allah Ta'ala took His slave and elevated him, and what it must have been to meet Allah Ta'ala, to be in front of Allah Ta'ala. That's what I hope for and what I dream for, just knowing that that's the way Allah Ta'ala takes care of His beloveds. I can hope that one day I can see Allah Ta'ala, not the way the Prophet ﷺ saw Him, but even if it's just a shadow of what the Prophet ﷺ saw, that'd be enough for me.
Plenty of his whole life, every moment, every single part of his life inspired me. But
one moment that really inspires me is, and subhanAllah, like when the Prophet ﷺ was dying and his daughter Fatima came and he told her like that he was dying and he knew that, and she started crying, and then he told her that that she would be joining him soon, and she laughed. I think that even in that dying, when he's dying, like he's still thinking about someone else, not himself, and that is an amazing moment to learn from. Always putting others before himself, and that was one of his characteristics that to emulate.
Sometimes we go through things in life that are tough, and we want to island, we want to separate ourselves from society. Sometimes we want to zone out. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had so much going on in his life. He lost 6 children. He went through so much. He lost his wife, and he cared so much for the people around him who were being tortured because they said La ilaha illallah. But he was able to balance that, and he was able to, even from the beginning, even from when he first received revelation, he was able to gather himself and collect himself within a day or two, and get back to living in society, immersing himself with people, and being able to raise a nation. And I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst that nation and enter us into Jannah with Rasulullah.
When he was doing his da'wah to his own people in his own town, and no one was receptive to the idea of one God. So it was a moment in his life where not only did he lose his loved ones, but he decided to travel to a neighboring city named Ta'if. We know the story, subhanAllah.
But he was kicked out of Ta'if, and there was a moment where he was, really feeling alone, and he made this dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's a very tense dua, where he, in a sense, was calling out to Allah and says, "Who have you left me? Man takiluni, who did you leave me with? And oh Allah, all I want is your pleasure, As long as you're pleased with me, that's the only thing that I care about." And then this guy comes and he offers him grapes, and the Prophet ﷺ, it's a long story, but I think that's one of the most touching moments where I felt where the Prophet ﷺ, he was reaching out to Allah in a moment of almost in need.
Allah heard and obviously knows what had transpired, and He sent an angel. The angel who was in charge of the mountains with a command that, hey, if He gives you the command to grab these mountains and eliminate and destroy this town, do it. And the Prophet knew that he had this ability, this big dua, and he refused. So that shows, as a human being, as a prophet that he was, his mercy. For me, I don't have that mercy. It's kind of hard. I become bitter. But I accept that aspect of my life, that I have to be compassionate. I have to understand. Then who am I to say, you know what, then forget you, or you'll be a person who will go somewhere where you belong, and we shouldn't be this way. And for me, it's a very touchy, inspirational part of his life.
One of the most inspiring stories was the story of how he, on his way home, I believe, every day, there was an old woman that would pour dirt on him as he was walking home. And it was just incredible, the level of patience. Like, I don't think there's a human being capable of being that patient, and someone keeps throwing trash at you or on you every single day. At some point, you kind of want to lose it, but mashallah, he was so patient and just dealt with it in such an honorable and admirable way. And then the one day that the woman didn't pour trash on him, he actually went to check on her to make sure she was okay, despite everything he'd been going through with this woman. So that to me was really very inspirational. It just shows like the goodness of the Prophet ﷺ's heart, and it's just the most beautiful example of what, you know, a human being should be.
And it especially speaks to us in this day and age where we can't go a second without lashing out on someone if they do something that harms us. But the Prophet would go through such pain and he still showed great patience.
That shows a man or a woman's true strength and quality. And I think for me, that applies every day to life, and for every Muslim around the world as well, to forgive and to be sincere.
When they came back to Mecca and they had set up a camp before going into Mecca, he told them to pitch his tent at the grave of Khadija. That's heavy. That's the kind of love you want, you know? That's amazing, you know? I think that's huge.
The most inspiring moments from the Prophet Muhammad's life was when he conquered Mecca in a peaceful way and forgave
the Prophet conquered Mecca and he rode in, somebody yelled out that today is the day of revenge. And the Prophet ﷺ, he learned a lesson from the story of Yusuf ﷺ, and he said, no, today is not the day of revenge, today is the day of forgiveness. And I think that to me, you know, despite all that had happened, all the persecution and all the hatred and all the names, whatever, violence, all those things didn't matter to the Prophet ﷺ. What mattered to him was doing things in a way that that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was happy with, and doing things that, you know, in the way through what he had learned through the Quran.
One of the things that inspires me most about one of the stories of our beloved Prophet ﷺ is the way he treated his companion and his friend Jalebi, a man who was almost outcast from society, and how he took him in and gave him dignity in both his life and in his death. He helped him to be married, he allowed him to be a companion. That inspires me today. How many of us would do the same thing? We should aim to live this way in our life, inshallah.
How the Prophet ﷺ made everybody he came in contact with feel, you know, to the point he'd give everybody his full attention. He would, if he was talking to somebody, he would face them entirely with his entire body. He would listen to them until they were finished. You know, he would make them feel like the most important person, from the youngest, you know, from his grandchildren who would climb on his back, would come, you know, during Jummah, and he'd carry them to the eldest of people, to the blind, to the disabled, you know, regardless of, you know, where they were from, race, whatever. He made every single individual he came in contact with feel like they were the most important person in the world.
A moment in the Prophet's life that truly inspires me is probably two specific things of things that occurred in his life. One of them is his joking human nature, and I guess that both things are humanly related. Is one that when he was sitting with Ali radhiyallahu anhu, they were eating dates, and a few pile of dates started to form in front of the Prophet ﷺ, where the Prophet would eat a date and put the seed in front of him, and Ali would eat a date, put the seed in front of him. On the entrance of the other Sahaba, Ali radhiyallahu anhu, he turned to them and he said, "Did you guys not see the Prophet ﷺ? He ate all the dates and didn't give me any." And of course they knew the Prophet, he was joking. And so the Prophet jokingly responded and said, "Ali, did you eat all the dates with the seed itself?" And they all started to laugh. This just showed the human aspect of the Prophet ﷺ, is when, you know, he found out that one of the Sahaba was going to a certain market in Medina, trying to literally pick up and show off to the women there, trying to get married. So the Prophet asked him, you know, "What are you doing here?" And so he goes, "I think I lost my camel." And so every once in a while, whenever the Prophet would see him, he would ask him, "Did you find your camel yet?" And he would say, no, I haven't found it. Up until the point where the Sahabi got so embarrassed, and he told him, you know, what actually happened was this. The Prophet just smiled and laughed. He goes, "I don't need an explanation." He just patted him on the back and was human with him, alayhi salatu wasalam.
I think, you know, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his life is always inspiring in the little things, in the very like mundane things, and then also in the really exceptional things. So I think about how he interacted with people, and his level of kindness and generosity always comes to mind, especially with children. So just even in prayer, he'd be very considerate of other people, such as his grandchildren, and allowing them to kind of, you know, jungle gym climb on him. because that says a lot about him as his character in terms of his caring towards other people. He's always very thoughtful and considerate and not looking for himself always, but looking towards others and helping people.
When I was a child, my father was an imam, and I think I was about 2 or 3 years old, and I climbed onto the minbar with my father, and a lot of the people were very upset. They were very visibly upset, and they made it very clear to my father that they were upset. So the very next Friday, what my father did is before he gave the khutbah, he grabbed me and took me up on the minbar with him. And when I heard this story, I thought, this was something that he did. But then reading the seerah, I realized that this was something that Prophet ﷺ did with his grandson, with his grandchild. And so that was something I sort of, personal for me. It was very personal for me because it was something that the Prophet ﷺ did. And it was something that my father did because the Prophet ﷺ did it. So that's just something personal for me that really touched me personally.
When the angels came to him in the cave of Hira, it was a very dramatic moment. Like someone being blessed prophethood is such a powerful thing, and to be granted that in one person really shows that how well, even though he had a very human reaction to it, he was shaking, he was hot, he was cold, he really loved, he accepted it, and that's one thing I don't think anyone else could do today.